the best conversation ever. Joya, welcome.
Awesome.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I got a chance to talk to Dave, like a month or two ago. That was a fun conversation.
Well, that's because he's
To
great.
Yeah, but you know what? He will say the same of you. He will say you are great as well. So I said, well, if your wife is as great as you say she is, and I know she is because I met you last year in
Yeah.
I think it was Austin. Yeah, we were in
Chicago, I
Austin.
think.
Chicago. Oh yeah, that's
With
right. It was Chicago.
Jamie's. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. And I met you last year and I said, "Of course, your wife's great." I met her and she has
Yeah.
to come on the podcast and talk about
Oh,
all this fantastic things that you and she are doing or what she's doing now. So you are a functional medicine specialist and I love that term. I want you to talk about what that is and how you got there and then tie it in with small steps that you took that had big
mhm.
results and shaped you and brought you to where you are now. So welcome.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this. I love to talk about this. So this is an easy conversation to have. So I'm a family nurse practitioner, and that means that I've got a master's in nursing. And so ever since I don't know, I was quite young. I would call my parents Christian hippies. So I was kind of raised in that more natural um, health space anyway. My mom made her own fruit leather and we had lentils a lot. And, that's what that kind of meant when I was a kid. Um, I knew I was always curious about the whys. So, why does the body work this way? And how does it work this way? And just very curious to understand at a deeper level than what we're traditionally taught. And so that fits really well with functional medicine because functional medicine strives to understand a lot of those whys. Why do you have IBS? Why do you have hot flashes? And really dig a lot deeper to understand and then to also help the patient understand what's going on. And then as a result, we can understand better how to fix certain problems, not necessarily in terms of a prescription all the time, although sometimes I will prescribe when necessary. My goal really is to understand the problem so we can solve the root cause or causes in many cases, to restore health. The body has been created miraculously and it is capable of healing if we give it what it needs and take away what it doesn't need or what's harming it. And that's a very simplistic way of putting it, but I think to kind of look at the big picture is helpful to understand. So I went to nursing school, loved that, had a great experience at Northwestern in downtown Chicago for many years. Then went back for my master's and had a great experience being at a pain management practice that also did a lot of functional medicine from 2011 until 2018 when I took that leap. Well, it was probably a big leap, and started my own practice. I knew it was time. I had kind of outgrown the pain management practice, and there were just a few reasons that that wasn't a good fit for me anymore. And I really didn't want to start my own practice. I thought it was going to be way too much work, and I had two 4 year olds and a 6 year old at that time, two of whom had some special needs. Um, so I look back and I think, what in the world was I thinking? But Dave really encouraged me, even though he was a lawyer working full time downtown and, home less than both of us would have liked him to be home.
Yeah.
That was the decision that we kind of both came to that was going to be the best for me and for our family, and then for patients who I would care for. I truly believe that this functional medicine, the framework, is the best way under which to care for and heal patients. And so I've been doing this since 2018, and he actually left the practice of law in um, well, 2.5 years ago now, to help me run the business. And because I'm a healthcare provider, I am not a savvy businesswoman or was not a savvy businesswoman, certainly at that time. And so we kind of wanted to replace his income. He was really not happy being a lawyer, good at it, but not happy. And so we kind of wanted to then grow Nourish House Calls, the business that I had started in 2018, to a point where that was supporting our family. And it
Mm,
is. And we're looking to grow, of course. And it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful, wonderful for me, for our family, for our marriage. It's been great.
Wow. Okay. So talk about Nourish House Calls. What is it, and what do you do when somebody comes to you? What are they looking for?
Yeah, so it is a functional medicine practice where I actually make house calls within about a 10-mile radius of where we are in Illinois. I also do virtual visits and I sublet office space so I can see patients in person even if they're not within my kind of drivable radius. So I have those three different options there. Primarily, patients are coming to me either if they know that this is the type of care that they want, or they've had kind of a disappointing experience in traditional medicine. A really good example would be my menopausal or perimenopausal patients. They tell their gynecologist or primary care provider about these symptoms that they're having, and very often get told there's really nothing that can be done about it. Or they're prescribed sleeping pills and antidepressants, which is if they're coming to me, typically not what they want. They kind of understand that there's a little bit more underlying and maybe a better way to
Mhm,
approach this. Um, Oftentimes they feel unheard in their traditional visits, and that's not a fault of a lot of the providers. It's a fault of the system that requires very, very short visits. I always tell people I couldn't care for you in this way if I had 7 minutes to see you either.
yeah,
So there's a lot of teaching involved, education. There's a lot of asking a lot of questions to understand and get to know my patient because that really is a big part of how I help them, both the education piece and then the listening and understanding piece. And that's something that they have not gotten in a traditional medical setting typically. And
mhm,
sometimes I almost feel like half of the benefit of seeing a functional medicine provider is that sense of being listened to. I'm finally being heard, right? As the
mm,
patient, and somebody's finally caring to listen to all these details that are maybe important or maybe are not, but now this person is listening and can tell me, is my sleeplessness related to my weight gain? Is that related to
mm.
my digestive problems? And so to kind of have somebody listen and be willing to investigate and put the puzzle pieces together.
Okay, so alternative medicine, and I'm familiar a little bit with that space too. If somebody is not familiar with alternative medicine and they kind of want to come to you, but they're so used to prescriptions and things, that's all they know. How do you help them kind of ease their way into an alternative way to look at their problems and be open to alternative methods to treat themselves other than just taking a pill.
Yeah, I think it's always meeting a patient where they are. I am not in the business of forcing what I think is the best way on anybody. It's always a back and forth and an education. I can tell the patient what I think is going to be the best, but then we have a conversation about how do they feel about that? Is this an option, financially? Is it an option time-wise? Are they willing to make changes to their nutritional intake, for example, that are going to lead to the best results? I really don't want to work with somebody who is not at least a little bit motivated to invest in their own health, both monetarily is one, but certainly in terms of time and energy. Um, it's not fair to that patient to pay me if they're not kind of invested in that too. And then it kind of sets both of us up for failure if the patient's not at least a little bit interested in kind of learning at least more
Mm,
about that. Because if they're not interested now, I'm a little bit stuck. I feel like a failure because the patient isn't ready yet to maybe
mm,
put that effort in, and then they feel like a failure and maybe they waste their time and money. So I always like to have that patient just have a little bit of a foot in the door already of, I know this is what I need. I may not know enough about it yet,
mhm.
but I know this is the direction that I want to head.
Yeah, that education piece is crucial, like, it
Yes.
just actually just being curious and want to learn, you've got this problem and now
Mhm.
you really need help. You mentioned menopause for women. What
Mhm.
are some other common ailments that you see that you treat for
Mhm.
as they come through?
So, a lot of the symptoms that surround that, including things like weight gain and hair falling out, fatigue, joint pain. I don't feel like myself is a
Mm,
typical complaint that really is not identifiable in traditional medicine, right? They're going to look at you and go, "Oh, I guess you're depressed, so here's an antidepressant," right? And the woman, mostly it's women, men too, they just know that that's not quite the right solution. That's not quite what's going on, but they can't identify it. They're looking for help. Other things I deal with a lot are GI issues. So
mm,
whether it's diarrhea, constipation, bloating, reflux, um, just again, kind of these amorphous maybe unidentifiable symptoms. They're gonna, maybe they have, often they have gone to a gastroenterologist to check it out. And they've done the scope, they've done the colonoscopy, maybe they've done the endoscopy as well, and everything's fine. Well, the patient's kind of at the end of a road there, then maybe they're offered a medication, which again, if a problem hasn't been identified, we're kind of guessing,
Mm,
at what medication it might be. Yes, could we stop the diarrhea or constipation with a medication? Sure, but from my perspective and from many of my patients' perspectives, we want to know why. Why is this happening? Is there an imbalance that we need to fix to help the
yeah.
body work well on its own again? And then, various aches and pains too. And again, part of that can go along with menopause as we lose estrogen. Those aches and pains will start. I see men quite a bit as well, especially starting after maybe 40 or so when they start to realize that they need to take a little bit more initiative
Mm,
and be proactive about their health. Often that looks like testing for hormones, testosterone in particular. Um, Maybe they're not feeling quite like themselves. They're not sort of on their game like they used to be.
yeah.
Motivation suffers, libido and erectile function can suffer, mood can suffer, sleep can suffer. They're starting to gain fat and lose muscle. So similar to a lot of the women as well. Um, but men have their
Mm,
own, idiosyncrasies, their own kind of bent on their
yeah.
symptoms.
Yeah, we can't stop
Um,
that aging process.
we
It's
can't.
it's gonna
Yeah,
it's
we can
gonna happen
certainly
one
do
way or the other.
things, yeah,
Yeah,
to optimize aging. And again, better to
yeah.
start early. But often that 40, 50-year-old age window is when patients really start to think about that and realize, oh, I guess if I want to age in a healthy way, I probably need to start thinking about that sooner here.
Are there some common things that everybody could do to help in the aging process that would I hate to say, quote, unquote, "slow it down," but, assist in the
Yeah.
fact that we're getting older?
Yeah, for sure. So inflammation is one of the things that is kind of a really potent pro-ager. So,
Yeah.
ages us faster. So then we have to ask, well, what causes inflammation? So sugar, carbs, simple carbs are one thing. Alcohol is another big one, and our culture around alcohol, I think, is slowly changing. But there's really no denying at this point that alcohol is a toxin, and it's a toxin that we can choose to enjoy from time to time, but there really are not benefits to
Mhm.
alcohol. The resveratrol in red wine is at such a small amount that you'd have to drink so much red wine to get any benefit from that resveratrol.
Oh
So
my
as
god,
long
that was
as
the first thing I was thinking. I'm like, "Well, I heard red wine is great. All Europeans drink, wine and red wine, and, that's a great thing to have. 1 glass a day is good." So, that's not the case anymore, huh? They're changing that.
No, and I'll tell you,
Interesting.
I say that with a little bit of, I guess, maybe guilt or sadness for myself, because I used to enjoy having a glass of red
Oh,
wine, many nights a week. And, I was of that mind frame too of, well, if I'm going to drink something, it should be red wine because that's going to be the healthiest. It's interesting because after I started learning about this and listening to a podcast by Andrew Huberman, who talked about all
yeah.
the things that alcohol does, I literally lost a taste for it.
Wow.
So I'll have it once in a while if I go out with my friends, but we don't really keep it at home. We don't really drink anymore. I feel better because of it. And that's one thing that I talk about a lot with patients too is tuning in. We're in the habit of doing a lot of these things, and whether it's exercise or nutrition or what we're putting in our body, alcohol wise, how do we feel? We don't often take that time to reflect. We have programmed ourselves to think alcohol's okay. High intensity crazy exercise is good for me, and we don't often then take a step back every once in a while and go, well, I've told myself this is good for me, but how does it make me feel? Do I
Mm.
feel better or do I feel worse after I make whatever choice it is? So tuning back in is something that I talk with patients a lot about.
Yeah. Are there certain things people can do or practices they can do to help them tune in with their bodies, especially if you're not used to it because
Mhm.
we're just bombarded all the time now with our cell phone going off or we walk by a TV or we're on the computer. It's sometimes
Um,
numbing,
uh,
so what are some things you tell patients they can do?
Well, I think first of all, it doesn't have to be complicated. It's
Huh.
it's just that knowledge of, oh, what I've always done might not continue to be the best thing for me. So, okay, I had, some French fries, or I had a glass of beer or wine. Just being aware of how they feel.
Mm,
Again, it doesn't have to be you sit for 20 minutes and think, I mean, you certainly could do that, but it doesn't have to be complicated or time consuming. It really is just being aware that you should be paying attention and could be paying attention to this. One interesting thing is that even people ask a lot about food sensitivities. Food sensitivities are different than food allergies, but they're hard to identify because they can
yeah.
take up to 72 hours after you've eaten, say, an egg, if you're sensitive to eggs. It can
Oh,
take up to 72 hours after to notice any symptoms. Well, do you know what you ate 3 days ago? I sure don't remember unless I would write it
right.
down and that. So it can be
Huh.
hard to nail down where those food sensitivities are.
Oh, that's really interesting because my son, who's now he's 29. Actually, he'll be 30. 22, no, he'll be 29 in July.
Okay.
So we're going back way back, and he had food allergies. Not
Mhm.
real allergies, but probably more like sensitivities when he was a young child. And it was interesting that you said the 72-hour that could take up to that, because I found when he would eat oatmeal, of all things, his face would break out. And
Yes.
it wasn't 72 hours later, it was like a half an hour later, and it was just oatmeal that he ate. So I found,
Yep.
being someone who studied food sensitivity and food allergies way back in the day, because my kids had them and I had them. I never heard the 72-hour, but it
Mhm.
sounds like, yeah, it could be that too. I
Yep.
just think that's really interesting. I
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
not know that. Do you have any, can you share a story or two about any patients that you had?
Mhm.
Obviously, you can't tell who, but where they've come in for treatment and they had, short of a miraculous turnaround,
Mm.
that was a really, that was profound for them.
Sure. Yeah, one in particular I'm thinking about, I still work with her. This was probably, I started working with her probably about 2 years ago now. Um, Very motivated, but she was a mother of three young boys. She is married to an attorney like I was, so I could definitely identify with that. She just, what she did, had no energy, no drive. It just was not like her at all. I could tell from talking with her that she was an outgoing and energetic person who just did not feel like herself. She had been to all the doctors, everything was normal. And
Mm,
so she was starting to feel like maybe she was crazy. Like maybe
yeah.
she wasn't having, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe this is how everybody feels, right? We start to play these kind of mind games. And she was doing that. So we did some testing, found she had C. diff, that very aggressive,
Mm,
scary bacteria overgrowing in her GI system, not to the point where traditional testing picked it up, but to the point where my functional medicine stool testing picked it up. We did hormone testing on her as well. She was 46 or so at that time. So in that perimenopausal time period where she was still getting periods, maybe not so regularly, it had been actually, I think, 3 months or so at that time. And so kind of unsure, are those hormones changing? And in fact, they were. And then we did some nutritional testing as well to determine, did she have deficiencies in any nutrients or vitamins, in amino acids? What was methylation looking like? What were the process and functioning metabolism of the mitochondria? So kind of getting a big picture. And then of course we talked about nutrition and sleep and exercise and all of those things. She was one of the people who told herself she had to keep doing high intensity interval training,
oh,
um,
I did that in
and
my mid
did
40s.
not, yeah, yeah, did not feel good. And in fact, it was probably draining her even more. So treated the C. diff, and that was with a traditional antibiotic. Oral vancomycin is what we used. When it's something like C. diff or strep throat, I don't mess around. We're prescribing the antibiotics and we're getting rid of it because you have to
Yeah,
have that kind of traditional medical knowledge, I feel like, too, and balance the risks versus benefits of natural versus prescription. So, anyways, in that
yeah,
case, we used
100%.
oral vancomycin, and then after that, we treated with probiotics and gut healing herbs and supplements, marshmallow and slippery elm and aloe, and all those kind of good things. So mixing those two, traditional and kind of integrative medicine, works really beautifully, to not only get somebody better but keep them better. Um, and then balanced her hormones out. So she needed, if I'm remembering correctly, a little bit of estrogen. She needed a lot of progesterone. Progesterone is something that helps to balance out our cortisol, which is our stress hormone, also to help balance out our blood sugar. So hormone balance was really important. Oh, the other thing was her libido was really low. So I gave her some testosterone. And she's probably one of the most drastic cases because she started out so sick, but she is just doing beautifully now, being the mom she wants to be, the wife she
Mm,
wants to be, the artist she wants to be. Just she is, and she was a very motivated patient who was great about following directions and doing the things that I asked her to do. So really, it's yes. Did I do good work with her? Absolutely. Did she really work hard to get
mhm,
better as well? 100%. So yeah, it just thrills me so much to be able to see that turnaround in people because it's
yeah,
really life changing. She wasn't cooking any meals.
yeah,
So then, and then there's that guilt, right? As the mom, you should be
yeah.
cooking the meals or whatever we tell ourselves about what we should be doing. And so I'm just so thrilled to see her functioning at her, closer to her full capacity now.
Yeah, that's very fulfilling, I would imagine, being in on your side and seeing somebody having that type of drastic change. I'm sure
Oh,
there's others out there that can relate to that. I mean, I remember being in my 40s, same thing, but I never pursued it, like, as to why, but
yeah.
when the body's not working right, you feel almost broken,
Yes.
and you get very frustrated. Actually, in you telling her story, I saw in my story as well, I would go to the doctors, all of them would say, "Oh, you're fine,"
Yeah. Yeah.
but you don't feel fine, and functional medicine can come in step in where the traditional medicine just wouldn't really, wouldn't isn't wasn't serving me, wasn't serving
Right.
others. What's, one thing that you thought would be hard about starting your
Mhm.
practice but wasn't? And what was one thing that you thought would be easy and wound up being more challenging for you?
That's a great question. So, what did I think would be really hard? Um, I think all the logistics of choosing an electronic medical record, malpractice insurance, taxes, like all the business stuff seemed really necessary and really boring. I just want to take
Mhm.
care of people and make them better.
I know.
um, but really, what it came down to for me, and I don't have ADHD, but I think a lot of us have maybe a little bit of that in us at certain times, maybe more than others. And so for me, writing a list of what I needed to do and to check off something off that list felt incredible. So for me, just kind of breaking it down into the steps. And picking a few each day or a few each hour or whatever it was to get done really helped. And then that sense of success and accomplishment then drove me towards more of a can do
Mhm.
mindset and attitude so that I could get more things done. Um, Something that I thought would be easy that's been hard, and this has probably been more recently actually. At the beginning of the business, I had a pretty nice influx of patients because another provider who was doing bioidentical hormones at that time kind of suddenly retired. All those patients needed a provider. I was an expert at that. And so the compounding pharmacy actually sent a lot of them my way. Now, as we're trying to grow more, I think something that is hard that I thought would be easier is the marketing
Mm,
piece. I have kind of a niche practice, and it's very individualized care, and it's cash based, and so getting the word out has been a little tougher than I thought. I don't love doing the Instagram reels. I'm a 42-year-old woman and I feel pretty silly that like, oh, how many likes did that video get, right? But that is important in business today in today's
yeah.
world. Um and just yeah, website and tracking all that. So thankfully like Dave handles all that. Of course I hear about it and we talk about it in our business meetings, but yeah, the marketing piece of it I would say um seems not to make as much sense as like the medical component
Yeah.
makes sense to me anyway.
Yeah. You're a mom
Mhm.
and you have relatively young kids and your wife, and you have a successful practice. What
Yeah.
does work-life balance look like to you, and what does it mean to you in your
Well,
season of life?
Yeah, I try to do a good job, and sometimes I do a better job than others at that. We have a 12-year-old daughter who has high functioning autism, so she requires some more attention, effort, intentional parenting. Whether it works or not is questionable still. And then we have 10-year-old twins, boy girl twins. Our boy has ADHD, so again, a little bit of an increased level of difficulty there sometimes. Um, so things that are important to me, I really like and enjoy making home cooked healthy meals. It's important to me to not eat out all the time or to just throw, a pizza in the oven for supper. Like protein and produce is something that I tell my patients all the time. And if it's something I'm telling my patients, it's something that I'm aiming for too. Um, and, making their lunches in the morning, spending time with them, putting them to bed at night, right? And um, usually pretty successful with those things. Again, some weeks are more busy work wise than others. And there's this constant struggle of my patients want me to help them. And I feel that pull and that desire to be helpful to them. But also, my kids are my kids and they need me and they deserve me. And I want them to look back at their childhood and not think, oh, mom like worked all the time. Um,
Yeah.
and of course Dave's here too, and so we kind of balance the parenting load. um but yeah, even things like laying with the kids before bed and just talking or reading or whatever is important, and we prioritize that pretty well. um Even if it's just for a few minutes, sometimes it's longer than others. But work life balance is always a struggle, because I love what I do for work, and so I especially find when the kids are, maybe having a particularly hard day, or they're, now they're talking back or arguing or whatever. It's pretty easy. It's too easy for me to kind of escape or check my phone and go, well, I'm checking, my email for work, or I'm texting back a
Wow.
patient, or right.
Yeah.
And so I have to watch that too, not to use that as an excuse too much or inappropriately. So
Yeah.
that's a balance I'm still trying to strike. I'm definitely not perfect at that.
Yeah, you spend a lot of time, you take care of everybody else. You take care of your family, you take care of your patients. What does taking care of you look like, and who
Yeah.
takes care of you?
That is a great question, and so many of us women especially need to hear that, and think about that. Tune in.
Yeah.
Um, Recently, what I started to do, I signed up at a gym, I paid for it, I committed to it. I'm going 3 times a week. I feel so good when I do that. And again, that's something that I'm telling my patients to do, right? We've got to build muscle, it's super important. And so I wasn't ever, out of shape necessarily, but to be doing something active like that, that's both good for my physical health and my mental health is really important. So whether that's maybe some people can't join a gym, whether that's working out in the basement for a half an hour, going for a walk, just doing something for physical activity. Um, the meals that I make are also, I think, part of self-care. Since I really love cooking and making healthy meals, that actually is, and for some people, that's not going to be true, right? Some people
Right,
just
right.
dread making the supper or thinking about the supper. I really am fed by that and energized by that and proud that I can make a healthy meal that my kids will eat most of the time. Um, so I
Good
love that.
kids.
Yeah. And then, allowing downtime too. So Dave and I were just talking about this, how we can more intentionally use the time after the kids go to bed before we go to bed, which as they get older is getting shorter.
Yeah.
But
Wait till they're
to,
real teenagers.
I know that we'll go to bed before them at that point.
Yeah, my
Um,
kids are on their 20s, so but I'm on the other side now.
yeah,
Just hang
yeah,
in there. It gets
right.
better. Then they leave.
Yeah, yeah, we're not quite there yet, although I'm sure it'll be here soon.
Yeah, it goes fast. Yes, it does.
We're really trying to figure out ways to use that time to connect back with each other because we work together, we're married, we're very happily married, we're very blessed, and we also can fall into that, we're work partners and not marriage partners
Mhm.
as much, right? And so I think as long as we work together, that will be an area that we just have to put intentional effort into. And there will be times where, and we've said this to each other before, I'm just feeling a little disconnected from you.
Mm,
And because we both love each other and are committed to the marriage, neither one of us, when the other tells that is offended, it's more of a, oh, yeah, you know what? I guess we really do need to step up our game or figure out a plan to reconnect. Or, yes, 2 days ago we had a lunch date at Chipotle, but like nothing romantic,
And
but just
you
that
call it a
intentional
business
connection.
meeting.
Correct.
Yeah, there you go. It's a
Yeah.
business meeting. Love
So
it.
just those ways to reconnect, I think to us is really important.
Yeah, and the fact that he's your business partner, you
Yeah.
can't fire him. So
No.
you're kinda stuck.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love
I
some of
wouldn't,
those.
he's great. I wouldn't want to fire him,
Yeah,
and I
right.
still want to feel romantically connected to
Oh,
him
sure. I
too.
I
Yeah.
would bet I would imagine it's challenging sometimes because you're
Yes.
working with your business partner and he's your husband and you have to, you don't you have a different dimension and dynamic to
Hmm.
your relationship that other people wouldn't have. If I go and I work in an office and I leave my house, then, that relationship, that business relationship stays there. I don't bring it home with me.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very interesting, but to your point, like you said a couple of times, you and Dave have a really good marriage. And I think that's the foundation. When you build on that, would you say that's why you can do what you do because you have that foundation? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We
Mhm.
started, we've been married for 17 and a half or so years. And we were married for a number of years before we had kids because we both went back to school pretty shortly after we got married. So we had that period of time to kind of get through a stressful experience and learn to live together and be happily married in that,
Yeah.
and work out a lot of the kinks, right, initially. And then
Sure.
having Sophie, right, having a daughter with some special needs, I feel like really can either pull you apart or bring you closer together. And part of that is what you both choose. Maybe all of it
Sure.
is what you both
Sure.
choose. Because
In
it's a
any
very
case.
stressful, yeah, it's a very stressful, it can be a very stressful experience, but both of us were intentional about being a team for her. And even if there were disagreements, which there aren't a whole lot of disagreements that we have, knowing the other person's intentions, I think is really important. He's not intending to upset me. I'm not intending to upset him. So if one of us happens to say something that's upsetting, it wasn't because we were intentionally trying to do that. And I think
Yeah.
understanding intention from your spouse or from your work, coworker or boss, understanding intention is really important, in interacting and having relationship with somebody.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Totally. 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
In your practice, I have a question about patients per se. Like when patients come in and what are some and start to pursue alternative medicine, what
Mhm.
do you see as some of the limiting beliefs that they
Mhm.
might come in with that you may have to kind of work with them on to help them get the treatment that they need?
Yeah. I think they've been told that there's no reason or no solution to their problems. And so if that's what they're telling themselves, that's definitely going to hinder progress. Um, It's so interesting. I've been reading more books lately and listening to maybe more podcasts too on how what we tell ourselves literally affects our cellular function. So, Bruce Lipton, is one of the books, I think, about the biology of belief is his book that I read, and just like profound information that I just did not learn in school, had no idea. Don't claim to fully understand the whole quantum, quantum physics, but his point is what we tell ourselves and what we believe directly affects our cellular functioning. Um, and so I've been working a little bit more with patients on that. It borders on, people thinking it's, kind of way out there or floofy stuff that doesn't really
Yeah,
matter, but it really does.
it does.
Um, Other limiting beliefs, there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and this is a little bit more concrete maybe, about what diet is healthiest for people to eat, or do estrogens cause breast cancer? Um, those are conversations we have to have, because if that's the impression and I'm recommending bioidentical estrogen to somebody and they've told themselves they're going to get cancer from that, well, we have to have a discussion about that, and maybe they end up not taking it. I am not in the practice of forcing treatment
Right.
on anyone. So then that's a discussion, and if they choose to take the bioidenticals, that's great. And if they choose not to, that's great too. I can still help them. Um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, what you tell yourself matters. I It's interesting that you brought that up and the quantum, like the energy fields and stuff. I just started getting into that a
Yeah.
couple of months ago too. Absolutely fascinating. The law of attraction and what you put out there into the universe and whether you believe in God, universe or
Mhm.
whatever, I it's interesting. I've been in the Catholic
Mhm.
I was Catholic for a while, then became Christian for and still am. But when you look at God and you pair it up against the universe, and it's like whatever you want to believe, people like to use universe and I go,
Yeah.
well, God did create the universe. God's out there, but I like universe using that word because it actually gives you a physical picture to think
Yeah.
about it. If you think about, like you could see the stars, you could see the picture of the Milky Way. You can't see God, but God is there. If God created
Yeah.
the universe and you put two and two together, it's fine. But
Yeah.
manifestation is a very, very fascinating and interesting
Yeah.
field.
Well, and I think
Re-
even for
yeah.
Christians, right? Because a lot of times Christians will go, "Oh no, I can't believe in that because
Right.
that's But really, I mean, God created us the way He created us, and so
That's right.
did He create us as energetic beings with energy pathways and meridians? Yeah, I think He
Yeah.
probably did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, if he
so
created it, yes, he did.
right,
It's
so
just
I
not
don't think
probable he did.
Right. So
Yeah.
I don't think that they have to be mutually exclusive. I think you can very nicely pair a strong Christian faith with a lot of the energy data and a lot of this, belief data. So yeah, I'm
Isn't
a
that funny?
Christian and I
What
also believe this.
Oh, isn't that funny? What you just said, pairing the science, the energy, quantum field science with Christianity, it's actually included in my book. I have a book coming
Oh,
out in a couple of
awesome.
months, and that was one of the I have it's funny you should say that because I've never heard anybody else put the two and two together, and I was for so many years yeah, a Christian, Christian in the church, but you knew of God, but the science, you didn't touch the science.
Right.
You were either a creationist or you were a I forget the other one. Um
Okay.
Darwinian or whatever it was. Like you were either one or the other and you couldn't put the science in there.
Yeah.
And then I had this epiphany moment one day. It's like, wait a minute, God created that energy and he gave us the science and the ability to see it.
Yeah.
So they're naturally intertwined. I just,
Right.
it was just like that moment where you just went, "Oh, wow.
Right. And
Okay.
even just how our bodies
It's
are
amazing."
created
Yeah, yeah.
miraculously and how they
Have you
heal and
have you ever heard of the grandfather clock, the largest grandfather clock in the room, that
no.
study that was done? All right, so I'll quick recap it here. My friend Chase Tollison was on the podcast, I guess, a couple months ago, and he was talking about how they did a study and how they would put a large grandfather clock in a room with smaller grandfather clocks and then they would all start them at different times so the pendulums are not swinging in unison, they would be swinging whatever different timings, and then they would start the largest grandfather clock in the room, and then over time, I don't know how long, but over a whatever period of time, then all the clocks in the room had the pendulum swinging in unison.
That's so
And
interesting.
so the largest one radiated that energy into the room, and then all the other ones around it started to take on the same cadence as the
Yeah.
largest one in the room. And, when you translate that into life, it's who you surround yourself with does actually influence how you resonate, whether you're positive or whether you're negative. And
Yep.
I just think it's just an absolutely fascinating field
Well, and
to
if we
kind of
really,
consider.
again, tune into how we're feeling,
Mhm,
you can sense, I feel like most people can probably sense the energy of another person if they're willing to pay attention to it.
mhm.
Does that person across the table from you make you feel happy, safe, nervous, uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Um, you can there is that sense too. And I ask my patients to pay attention to that all the time to, how does exercise or food make them feel, but also in relationships.
Mhm.
Is that friend, do they provide good energy to you? Do you provide good energy to them? Like, how do you feel when you're with them? Have you just told yourself this is a good relationship because it's been going on for so long? Or is this maybe something that's draining your energy and making you sick? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Who you are around really does affect you. What's something that very few people agree with you on?
well, uh, free medical choice in terms of how we treat our kids in terms of vaccinations.
Mm,
So a lot of my patients are on board with doing the research and making a choice for themselves, which I fully support. But I think that there's a lot of just blind following when it comes to how we choose to prevent disease in our kids.
mhm. Yeah, we could peel back the onion layers on that one as well, and we could go in there. I don't know if I wanna go in there or not, but my kids and you know what, and it's not a new debate either. I guess
No.
my point, it's not a new debate because it was around my kids, like I said, my oldest is almost 30, so let's rewind 30 years, and I have 3, and even back then, I was questioning vaccinating them.
Yeah.
I did eventually, but the infant vaccines at the time, it was at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year. It was very young.
Yeah.
And after my first son got sick from vaccine, I think his illnesses were coinciding very quickly after he was vaccinated. So
Yeah.
we put 2 and 2 together. I chose not to vaccinate the 2 others at a young age.
Mhm.
Eventually, they did get
Sure.
vaccinated, but they did it when their immune systems were more developed and they were older, like 7, 8, 9, 10,
Yeah.
11, like around that
Yeah.
age. And it's just at the end of the day, it really is number one choice, and which you have, but you don't have. They say you have choice, but you really don't.
Yeah.
It just depends, how you look at it. But I think just letting them that choice is important,
Choice
and
is very
don't always
important.
have that.
Right.
Don't always
And
have that.
choice comes from both sides, right? Like
True.
women should be able to choose for their bodies, but then, oftentimes those are the same groups who are not allowing choice
Right.
for things like vaccinations and medical care. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Choice. It's all and yeah, everything. 100%.
yeah.
Anything's all a choice. If you could go back to your younger self and give yourself a message, what would it be? And why would you tell
Mhm.
yourself that?
This is something that I've learned from my husband. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. In other words, I tend to be a perfectionist and I tend to let that either cripple or delay me or stall me from doing things or finishing a project. Um, a good example is for one of our programs in the practice. I decided I needed to make a list of non-toxic body care household cleaner products because that's a huge issue, the toxicity that we expose ourselves to.
Mhm.
And he kept a week after week at our business meetings. Did you finish that list? Did you finish that list? And I was like, no, because there are more things that I could add to it, right? It's not
Yeah.
perfect yet. He goes, is it good enough? I'm like, well, yeah,
Mhm.
it's good enough, but it's not, perfect.
Yeah,
So
it's done.
I think, yeah, not letting perfect be the enemy of the good. So not letting perfectionism cripple, um,
Yeah.
cripple you either. Yeah.
Oh, good. I needed to hear that,
Yeah,
even if
I need
nobody
to
else
tell
did.
myself that on a daily basis.
I needed to hear that. I wanna be mindful of your time because 'cause I'm watching the clock
Yeah.
here, and I know you have to go soon. What is one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered that question or expanded on the topic?
So I could always talk more about menopause and hormones, and the safety of hormones. And I guess that would be another thing people would disagree on.
Mm,
Um, the research, especially recently, is pretty clear that hormones are safe, and so I love to talk about that. Um, so we could talk about it another time,
yep,
certainly.
I think
Um,
so.
but I really feel passionately that appropriate and safe hormone therapy for women and men um, is the right choice. And I do it for myself. I would do it for my family.
Okay. As
Yeah.
we close, what is one small step that someone can do today that's gonna help them change their tomorrow?
Ooh. Um, there's so many things, right? A small step today. pick one thing to change, whether that's working on increasing your vegetable intake, working on maybe you can commit to going for a 10-minute walk every day, something that's going to improve your health. I think because health is so important. And once you start making those decisions, you're more likely to continue to make those decisions. So I would say pick one thing. Don't overwhelm yourself. Just pick one thing and work on that.
Love it. Love
Yeah.
it. Well, Joya, thank you for the gift of your time. This has been a great
Awesome.
conversation. I've totally enjoyed myself. How can
Good.
people
Same
reach
here.
out to you and find you?
Yeah, so we are at nourishhousecalls.com, and then we're on Facebook and Instagram with Nourish House Calls. Um, yeah, and they can send me a message through the website as well if they want to book a discovery call, if they're curious about becoming a patient. All our information's on the website, but I always like to have that kind of free 15-minute discovery call with people before they commit to anything or before I
Yeah.
commit to them.
Sure, sure. Yeah, you have to make sure it's a
Um,
good fit all around. I
yeah,
agree. Well, thanks again so much for your time. This has
you're
been
very
great.
welcome. Yeah, I enjoyed this as well.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good, you're welcome.